Welcome and greetings, career-minded superstars. You are listening to the exclusive Career Coach, your podcast for all things career. And I'm Lisa Edwards, the indispensable career coach for superstars just like you. Now let's dig into this week's topic, shall we? Go from dragging yourself to work each day to finding a job you love. The Career Spring program is for high-achieving and ambitious mid-level professionals like you who are looking for a job that uses your zone of genius, recognizes your value, and pays you what you're worth. If you're ready to learn more, schedule a complimentary consult using the link to my calendar in the show notes. Be sure to follow me on Exclusive Career Coaching on Facebook, Lisa Edwards on LinkedIn, and Lisa.Edwards on Instagram. Greetings. How are you today? All right, we're into August now. It's hot. Of course. I think I saw for the 4th of July that it was something like the hottest day on record in the history of the world, like for the whole world or something. And I just thought, well, that's great. We've certainly had a very hot summer down here in Florida. I have a guest today that I'm very excited about. We're going to talk about project management. And I've told you guys before that I have a lot of people reach out to me on a daily basis wanting to be on the podcast. And many of them are either really doing what I do, and so there's no need for that overlap, or they are completely off base, and it's clear that they've never listened to my podcast and they're just throwing out things. But Ahmed, it really resonated with me because I have had so many questions from clients and those that I've done consults with about project management. And I really wanted to speak to someone who does this on a day-to-day basis to talk about the field of project management, and particularly those of you that may want to step into it with another job title. So I think one of the things that's going to come out of today is you don't have to have the title project manager to do project management. And what might that look like? So Ahmed, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So why don't you start by telling your story? Let the folks know where you come from and all of that.
Sure. Yeah, no, happy to. So my background is mostly in tech. I've worked for some of the largest names in the tech world, companies like Microsoft, like Google. Right now I'm with Amazon. I've been an engineering manager in a lot of these roles. And in addition to that, I also run a coaching company, the Thriving EM, where I essentially coach engineering managers to be effective leaders. And that's where a lot of these kind of overlap with project management comes in, because as an engineering manager, oftentimes you have to wear the project manager hat as well. And I'm excited to dive more into that and discuss it with your audience today.
Excellent. So why don't we start with a really basic question for people who maybe don't really know what a project manager is. So what do these people do? And I'm wondering if you run across any frequent myths or misunderstandings about project management that you'd like to dispel now.
Yeah. I mean, there's honestly a lot of them. I don't have a formal definition, but essentially project managers make sure the project is running smoothly, delivers on time, and you keep the stakeholders involved aware of what's going on the project sort of all the time. Some of the biggest myths, got a lot, especially if you're working with technical folks or technical people. People tend to dismiss the role of the project manager. They think they just add sort of more hurdles in the way. They jump in, they ask questions, and they're obviously a lot of the times not really technical themselves. So sometimes engineers and the like will think, this person is wasting my time and just let me work on my little piece of the world. In reality, though, project managers typically have a much better, what I call a 10,000 foot view of what's going on. If you know the famous analogy of like the blind people trying to touch an elephant, and everybody touches a different piece of the elephant and they think it's something else. But then if you step back far enough, you could actually tell it's an elephant. I think this applies really well with project managers and technical projects, because often they see all the different moving pieces across the different teams, and they could detect issues early or call something out and make sure that things continue to run smoothly. So that's one of the biggest kind of misconceptions. Some of the other ones, which I think would be also interesting for your audience, is that you need an MBA or you need a PMP to actually get into the field and do the role as a product manager, which is completely not true in practice. these things can help, but they're never sort of a prerequisite to actually to get into the field. And I'm sure there's a few others that we will probably dive into as well as as we continue our chat.
Sure. And that was one of my questions about the PMP. That's specifically the question that I get most often from folks who think that they need to have that. Do you have the PMP designation, first of all? And then secondly, what can you tell the audience? Very big picture. We don't need to get in the weeds with the PMP, but kind of what does that process look like to the degree that you know about it?
Right. I mean, I do not have it, and I've been managing projects for some time. And in fact, I just helped one of my clients land a role as a project manager recently without a PMP degree either. The PMP designation itself, it's nice to have. It's helpful. I'm not saying it would hurt someone to get it. The process teaches you sort of the fundamentals of project management and how to run projects, but really, if you have the practical experience, that's at the end of the day, that's what a prospective employer would care more about and would look for. However, saying that, some employers do actually require it. But if you want to get into project management, I wouldn't recommend that path to start off.
So it sounds like it has a place. It can be important. Some employers will require it, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to get it before stepping into your first project management role. It sounds like kind of that's backwards. We need that experience. We maybe want to put our foot in, make sure this is something that we want to do, that we are well skilled for. And then the PMP can be that sort of cherry on the top of what we are offering a future employer. Is that a fair assessment?
Exactly. You got it just right. Yes.
Perfect.
I believe like stepping into it gives you an experience for the role, especially if you're not sure that's the field you want to get into. And another big point is you're not going to sort of recognize a lot of the lessons in PMP if you don't have that practical experience of trying to manage a project at a time.
I remember, Ahmed, when I was in my master's program, I have an MPA, so public administration. And by and large, the folks that were in the program with me were working professionals. I was in a director level role at a university at the time, and a lot of people were working for, state agencies and that kind of thing. And those of us who were experienced, when we would do a case study, we would, I can remember one group in particular sitting in a circle, and we were talking about, well, when I had a similar situation, this is how I handled it. And someone else would say, well, this is how, I did something like that. And then there was one person in our group in that particular project that was right out of undergrad. And I remember her so clearly just sort of stopping everyone's conversation and saying, what's the right answer? And she did not understand that there wasn't a right answer. It was decisions. I think that particular case study had to do with budget, kind of how to allocate a budget based on a set of circumstances. And there is no right answer. And she didn't have that world experience to understand that perspective.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And you see that happening a lot, not just in sort of, formal designations and certificates, but even sometimes you'd read the book and, the lessons wouldn't really resonate. And then 6 months down the line, something would happen. I'd be like, you know what? I get it now. And this actually makes sense. So that practical experience definitely enriches kind of your learning. And sometimes, most skills you need to kind of acquire by, through execution, but by doing them, right? You could read all the books on project management, but if you haven't tried it sort of, in real life, it doesn't really click or resonate. And so yeah, you definitely need that practical experience.
So let's talk about kind of these levels of project management and how somebody might step into that. I've worked with, on one end of the spectrum, I recently wrapped up an engagement with a client in Canada who was he was project managing a $1 billion with a B dollar infrastructure project and had all kinds of contractors under him and, all kinds of things. And on the other end of the spectrum, I've had folks who have been, let's say, an office manager, and they've managed a project around, something in the office to make the office run more smoothly. Very small scale, but it's still a project, right? So what do you kind of see as the difference in the skills and the qualities, that you might need? First of all, what do you need to be a project manager, and what are some qualities you need to kind of begin stepping into those roles, maybe to raise your hand at your current employer so that you can begin to get that experience?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And in fact, I get that a lot, especially from a lot of the engineering managers that reach out to me in my coaching practice, because oftentimes they recognize the gap, and they need to step into a project management role themselves. In terms of kind of how to get, what kind of skills you need, the first one is, it may sound obvious, but you need to be able to manage yourself. You have to have a good handle on how you manage sort of your time and your calendar, and kind of get your own work done, and have a system for yourself to make sure you can get things done. Because if you're not organized yourself, you can't even start organizing people or projects.
Nope, absolutely not.
Right. So it starts there. So that's sort of the basic. And then really every step from that is just, you're just multiplying, that skill, and now you just have to do it with more and more people. The second one, again, may be very obvious, but it's communication. A lot of project management is about the management piece where you're actually managing all the different stakeholders, keeping them in the loop about what's going on. Because at the end of the day, as a project manager, you're not actually addressing the problem yourself. You're not the technician. You're not the software engineer, writing the code or whatever. You're not the person fixing the problem. But keeping everybody informed and involved and aware sometimes is more than enough. So that's number two, kind of having very good communication skills. The last one I will say, and this kind of helps you go, down that spectrum, from managing a small project in an office to a $1 billion project, is the ability to deal with ambiguity. The bigger the project, the more complex the project is, the more, I would say, chaotic and unpredictable and things would be. And especially the more kind of, the more tenured project managers, the principals, the staff managers, people at that level typically have an ability to be calm under, all this chaos and all this ambiguity. And they're good with it. They understand the process, they understand how it works, and they tend to operate in what I call kind of the gray zone, where things are black and white outside of, what you work on day to day, but they make things black and white for all of their stakeholders and everybody around them. But they are comfortable living in this chaos themselves as they kind of, set up the project and organize it and move it forward.
There's so much information there. And I was thinking about, kind of that progression from managing that small office project up to the $1 billion infrastructure project. And one of the things that the gentleman came to me for in that $1 billion project was he was getting feedback from his superior that he was too much in the weeds and micromanaging, but he was micromanaging because he was working with all these contractors who were not taking his authority, were not respecting his authority. There was a lot of ambiguity in this particular situation with who they were actually reporting to and who they were, kind of responsible to, I guess. And so we worked very hard on getting him up out of the weeds to be a true project manager. And so I guess what that triggered for me was thinking about this person who has only ever been an individual contributor. And especially if they move up to a certain level of project management, they have to deal with other people and their, timeline and organizational skills and their communication skills. What do you see as sort of the biggest challenge as you begin to have to manage others in a project? And what is maybe a tip for how to deal with that?
Yeah, no, that's a big can of worms you just hit there. There are two things that I think they correlate really well: accountability and aligned incentives. On the accountability front, so first off, it's very hard, like you say, if influencing without authority. If I don't if that person actually does not report to me, it's very hard to have influence on them.
Yes.
So you got to be smarter in how we approach it. Everyone is slightly different, and I think that comes with time and experience. You start to develop a better sense for that. But my biggest tip there is find ways to connect with the individuals on the project outside of the project itself. I see this mistake a lot, especially with more junior folks. In any kind of meeting, in any kind of work setting, they jump straight into the work, straight to talk about business, talk about the project. And then as soon as they're done, the meeting ends and everyone gets out of there. And that's, doesn't help you long-term build, that social capital with individuals. So find ways to connect. It could be as simple as, the first 5-10 minutes of a meeting, just keeping casual, chatting with folks about, their days or what's going on in their lives, etc. Especially in today's, virtual / hybrid remote world, it matters even more so to be intentional with that. And then hand in hand with that is setting up mechanisms to hold people accountable, right? That could be anything from, daily stand-ups to a weekly status meeting to, some sort of way to make sure individuals are reporting on their progress and reporting on their blockers in a public forum. And more importantly, making public commitments to the team about what they can and cannot get done in the next kind of phase or iteration. I was going to dive into the incentives piece. So that's the accountability piece.
Yeah.
The incentives one is perhaps a little bit easier, but essentially we're all, consciously or subconsciously moved by incentives. So understanding the incentives in a given workplace will help you move the right needles and make sure the right work gets done. So for example, a lot of people want to get promoted or, get that next, bump in pay, etc. And understanding that and perhaps working with their direct line managers to ensure that that project is highly visible enough and that their leadership knows about them doing that work and the impact of that work and how that could potentially help them get promoted, that naturally incentivizes individuals to want to actually do a good job on that and work harder on it. So finding the right incentives, and it's not always, promotions is the easy kind of case. It's not always promos. Sometimes people are interested in projects for, they just want to learn a skill or they're interested in the field, et cetera. But finding that incentive and unlocking it makes your job holding everyone accountable much, much easier.
It's this thought of that very high level of leadership intelligence where you're able to individualize your communication, your incentives, how you lead people very situationally, looking at, I know what incentivizes this person. I know what motivates this person. I know how to talk to this person. And there's so many personality implications there. And to your point about the incentives, when I first came to my last job in higher education, I sat down individually with each of my employees and I said, one of my questions was, what is rewarding to you? How would you like to be rewarded? And of course I expected to hear, time off, I don't know, whatever. But my secretary, she said ice cream. And I said, what? And so she was motivated by ice cream, very much so. And the interesting thing about that was I sort of at that point said, okay, so whenever we're celebrating something for our student workers or for our employees, full-time employees, let's do an ice cream social. She would have to be the one because she was the secretary. She had the P card, the pay card. She would go buy the stuff. She was happy to do that. So it was incentivizing to her to have an ice cream party, even though she had to set it up and do all the work. And I would have never known that had I not asked that specific question.
That's a really interesting story. Yeah. No, that's actually kind of funny. Yeah.
Well, I don't think most people are incentivized by ice cream. It kind of makes me happy. But the point being to ask the question and really get to know, and what you talked about, kind of talking about personal stuff before you get down to business. That's how you learn, who are the dog lovers, who are the cat lovers, who loves, fine dining, who's a wine enthusiast, who goes to every brewery, like whatever it is, who's a bicyclist. You learn these things and then you can get creative with ways to incentivize them, in addition to maybe the money and the promotion.
Exactly. Because a lot of the time, realistically, you cannot promote everyone or you cannot give everyone a bonus or whatever. And sometimes you could find these little creative ways to still keep people engaged and feel that their work is being recognized.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Ice cream or whatever.
All right. So let's say we've got some people now interested. They don't have a project management job. They haven't done what they would consider a project management role in their current job. What are some things, maybe 3 or so things that they could do in the next, 30, 60 days that they could set themselves up for that let's call it an entry level project management role?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I get that a lot I even get it from software engineers that want to get into people management, or, it's a very common question that people, raise. I think the three steps in my mind, I mean, it revolves around two concepts. You want to gain the skills, right? You want to build the skills, and you want to be able to demonstrate to a future employer that you could actually do the job. And then two, land that role, right? Like these are the two things you want to do. So on the gaining the skills part, my advice there would be to start by taking initiative on your current job. That could be something simple, right? Like there's always something that could be improved in the way you do work today, and then your current processes. I'll give you an example of this from one of my clients. They are an individual contributor, and you notice the team was regularly missing deadlines. So they kind of took the initiative, stepped up, and they decided to set up a quick retrospective with the team and, dive deeper into the issues and discuss it. And eventually they zoned in on an issue with how their code reviews process was taking too long. And they were able to implement a process around it to speed things up. And that helped them start hitting their deadlines a lot more frequently. So things like that. Recognize, something that's broken in your current process, or something that could be improved, and take that initiative, step up to actually do that role. So that would be my first sort of tip. Number two is talk to your manager, right? Because all good managers want to support the growth of their individuals. And all the time, the manager could even give you ideas and things they want to improve or see change within their team, but they just didn't have the time to do it. So if you step up and you're like, hey, I want to take care of this, I want to help you do that, and explain the background that you want to get into project management, then they would eventually, one, they'll either have a ready thing they've been thinking about, but just never got the time to, and they propose you for it. Or two, they will propose your name the next time a new idea comes up, or a new initiative is being formed, etc. So having that conversation with your manager is very important. And they also could give you other ways to practice and gain the skills, right? They could start giving you, more duties in the sense of, for example, writing a biweekly sort of newsletter, to the org, giving everyone an update on kind of the status of ongoing projects, etc. So they definitely can help you a lot there. The last and final tip is around opportunity, right? So let's say you've done some of that, you started to gain some skills. Now, the biggest thing is finding the right opportunity. And sometimes you could find that in your existing company. I'd recommend looking for that internally first, especially if you're part of a larger corporation. They tend to have various departments and various roles pop up, and it's easier to make the switch internally. If not, then start looking externally as well. Start applying, start interviewing, and more importantly, listing those skills that you gained and those experiences on your resume. Talk about how you manage a project on, in your current role, what impact you were able to have. I always tell my clients, the shortest path is a straight line, right? Like if an external employer offers you a role, your dream role, to be a project manager or an engineering manager today, why wait for your current company to get you there in 6 months to a year, and that's not even a guarantee, right? So So between these three, that really would be kind of my recommendation.
I apologize, folks, if you can hear yard noises. My yard man sounds like he's right outside my office window. So if there's background noise, I hope it's not too distracting. What I was thinking of as you were saying that, Ahmed, was I think it's also important to have the right mindset as this, let's call them a baby project manager. And what I mean by that is recognize what you're doing or what you want to do as a project, even if it's on a very small scale. So again, I've had office manager, because I've worked with everybody from, recent college graduates up to CEOs and C-suite executives. And, if you reorganized the purchasing system for your company and you saved the company money, that's a project. And one of the tricks or strategies that I use with clients' resumes is I will often, so they have these bulleted achievements, I will start it by saying project management and then what they did, so that I am spoon feeding the prospective employer, oh, this thing was a project that they managed, right? Like I'm like black and white, there it is.
Right.
I'm, in bold, it's a project. So recognize, these opportunities, call them, use that terminology, because that's going to help communicate to the others in your office, your boss, whoever, that you are doing project management. But also it makes a shift in your own mind in terms of seeing yourself and stepping into that belief that I am a project manager. I am capable of managing projects.
That's very true. That's a really good tip, actually. And if you look at, existing, so there's this theory that, we humans learn behavior socially, right? You learn behavior through others. So if you look at someone, if you're, regularly involved in someone that's doing, a certain type of behavior, you start to see that as normal, and you start to kind of make a mental shift that you want to kind of, do more of that. So along those lines, looking at existing job posts for project managers and reading the requirements and trying to see how that translates to your current job. Because a lot of time, like you say, it's you're doing it. It's just that you haven't phrased it correctly.
Yes.
And especially these days, it's really easy to use something like ChatGPT to rewrite some of your achievements to sound, to use the same terms and the same terminologies that, project managers say would be using.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So as we wrap up, are there maybe one or two tips that you would give people for, kind of that big picture of a successful career in project management, kind of from the 40,000-foot view?
Yeah, I mean, they're probably, I'd go with super general tips. Be very clear on what you want and take a long-term view at getting there. I think it's more important to focus on building skills, and the more skills you can stack, the more you compound kind of your career opportunities down the line. Mm-hmm. So it might not seem obvious today. Like today, you're better at organization, you're better at time management, you're better at communicating, you're better at managing projects. But all of these things combined, 2, 3, 5 years down the line, make you unstoppable and will land you opportunities you're probably not even considering right now. Mm-hmm. So that would be my first tip. And then my last tip is, get help, right? People like yourself, for example, you work with clients one-on-one to actually curate a process like that for them and tailor it. So definitely find the right coach, the right mentor, the right support system. Don't go at it alone. Gain those skills and make that move in your career.
I think those are wonderful suggestions and great tools for folks moving ahead. I think the piece also with developing that skill set is you hopefully at the same time are paying attention to what energizes you and what demotivates you so that you can become more focused in the kind of project management that you want to do. And that really only comes from experience. I mean, there are some things that without any experience at all, I can tell you, Ahmed, that I would be a terrible police officer or a secretary. I'm terrible at both of those things. And I know because I know the pieces of it and I wouldn't want to do them. However, there are other aspects of a career that I would really need to be in there and doing to say, oh, I don't so much like managing that kind of project or managing that kind of team. And that allows you to become the specialist that you really want to be, which tends to garner the highest pay.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. I mean, niches and the riches, like they say, like riches and the niches, right?
I like that. Riches and the niches. I'll have to remember that one. So how can the listeners find you, Ahmed?
So the easiest way would be through my website, thethrivingem.com. We'll link it in the show notes. I'm sure I've got an email newsletter up there. I'm also on Instagram where I post reels about leadership in general. A1 Wasfi is my handle. And again, we'll post it in the show notes for folks.
Excellent. Well, you guys check him out, especially if you're an engineering manager or if you maybe want some insight into all those name brand companies that he's worked for. I always find when I work with folks like you on their resume, it's always fun because there's, it's such name recognition and it's fun to play off of that on the resume. So I thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And folks, I hope that you enjoyed this and I hope you get some insight into the project management field and maybe how you can step into it or step up within it if you're already in it. Reach out to Ahmed if you have any other questions or want to learn more about what he's up to. And I'll see you next week. Take care. You've been listening to The Exclusive Career Coach with Lisa Edwards, CEO of Exclusive Career Coaching. It would be great if you would rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Also, I want to be your career coach, so be sure to ask questions about your career management challenges and job search situation. Until next time.